Before we begin, I just want to point out that Scarecrow shows that even supervillains go through puberty.
He's gone. Just a twisted shell of a man. What can you see?
A city engulfed in fear.
Hiya, Georgie.
You're looking.
You are the product of everything you fear. Violence, darkness, helplessness. All that remains is for you to watch as I drag your beloved Gotham into oblivion.
Welcome back to Villain Review, and today we're going to be looking at Scarecrow, specifically the one from the Arkham games. We're not going to talk about the other versions of the character because that's a video for another day. Anyways, let's begin. Like many villains, Jonathan Crane didn't have the most pleasant childhoods, but let's be honest, who did? Crane was bullied throughout high school for being skinnier than a vegan T-Rex. His bullies gave him the name Scarecrow to mock him, but Crane actually kind of liked the name. Being called Scarecrow got Crane to study fear and how it impacted the human mind. He would go on to help others with their phobias, and he even did work in Arkham Asylum. At some point in his studies, he developed his famous fear toxin, which made his subjects live out their deepest fears. Crane got a little carried away, though, and began harming his patients, so you know what that means.
Fired.
I beg your pardon?
Fired.
But I...
Crane goes crazy, does some crime, bam! Now he's on the Batman hit list. The funny thing about Scarecrow in the Arkham universe is that he's basically two different characters. The Crane we see in Arkham Asylum is so much different from the one we get in Arkham Knight, and it's a little distracting. In Arkham Asylum, we see a scrawny, high-pitched Scarecrow who doesn't have much ambition outside of poisoning Gotham with his gas. In Arkham Knight, we see him as the mastermind. He's methodical, and he has a deep, rumbly voice. I've tried to think about why they would make such a drastic change to the character, and I've come to the conclusion that the writers didn't really think the Asylum version would fly as this big mastermind of the operation that's gonna bring down Batman. And honestly, yeah, they're right, he can't. The Scarecrow we see in Asylum is a henchman, not a leader like we see in Arkham Knight. I appreciate the consistency and the character's obsession with fear in both games, and it is pretty unique. Both versions are unique and interesting in both character, performance, and design. I enjoyed both of them, and between the two versions, they cover a wide range of what can be seen in a villain. Unfortunately, both versions have a downside in common: motivation. With the origins given to us for this version, it's not convincing to make me believe we get the villain we see. I don't see an inciting incident in the early life of Jonathan Crane to warrant his change into Scarecrow. Yeah, he was bullied, yeah, he was fired, but that happens to millions of people across the world. As far as Arkham Knight goes, I don't see why his character takes such a big drastic turn where he needs to destroy Batman. Sure, it might be revenge, but it wasn't even Batman who caused his injuries, it was Killer Croc. As cool as both versions are, they lack that proper motivation that makes a good villain believable.
Think that would save your daughter. Do you know what happens when a man refuses to be controlled by his fears?
Luckily, for what he lacks in motivation, Scarecrow makes up with some really cool scenes. I feel like everyone remembers his scenes in Asylum as some of the best in the game. These scenes offer a new tone for the game and give players this almost fantasy element. I for one remember when my screen started glitching and I thought the game was going whack, but it really gives you this sense of what is real, and it makes you feel that as a player as you're playing as Batman, who's also feeling that. He's not given many scenes in Arkham Asylum, but they always hit. In Arkham Knight, Scarecrow is pretty much the main villain, and he has some cool scenes as well. I, for one, really like that monologue he gives in the gameplay reveal. I'm not sure if it's in the game. I think maybe it is, but it's actually really cool and serves as a great introduction to the character. My only big problem is that we don't get a nightmarish-like scene in Arkham Knight after the amazing ones we got in Asylum. They do something else with the toxin, which I must admit is pretty cool, but it just stinks we don't get a cool nightmare sequence. Unfortunately, the origins of Scarecrow aren't anything to brag about, and because of this, he doesn't really have a compelling or believable motivation. Luckily, we get two interpretations that are interesting and unique. We get some great scenes in Asylum, and being the big baddie to follow up the 2 games of Joker, Scarecrow gets the job done in Knight. It's a bit odd for us to get 2 vastly different versions of the same character in the same universe, but because both are so interesting, the inconsistency isn't that big of a problem. I'm gonna give Scarecrow a 7. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Tell a friend to watch, and comment below which villain I should review next. I'll see you next Monday.